Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Podcast slash VC Wisdom Podcast. We have Charles Simman with us. He's founder and managing partner at ECS Capital Partners. We're going to talk about capital. We're going to talk about being a flight instructor, being a pilot, being a consultant, being a professor. Charles is and was a lot of things, lived an interesting career to say the least. This podcast is brought to you by podfire.com. That's my podcasting company. If you want to start or scale a podcast, monetize the unconventional way, have fun interviewing folks like Charles and doing money at the same time, you can go to podfire.com. Charles, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself, what you do nowadays, and about ECS.
Well, happy to be here. I feel I'm doing good work. I have fun doing it, so I like to share. I've been three things in my life, my professional phases. My first was a computer guy when I was a very young person doing what became internet and AI and things like that. Then I spent most of my adult life as a biomedical researcher and a professor and, trying to improve the health of all of us and teach the next generation of scientists and doctors. And then during that time, I totally by accident stumbled on an angel investor, learned about what he did, and got fascinated by that and realized it was another way to affect the world. Besides discovering stuff and throwing it out there and hoping someone else uses it, I could be one of those people that actually catches it and runs with it. So for the last 25 years, I've been a part-time, and for the last 12 or 13 or 14 years now, I've been a full-time investor focusing on early stage companies that are based on technology, because I understand technology, companies that are going to do something good for the world, make it a better place, and finally, last but not least, hopefully make a lot of money for the entrepreneurs, the investors, and serve the customers, the world. So that's me in a nutshell.
Why did you pick immunology?
Well, that was a long time ago. Immunology was a burgeoning and still is a central medical discipline. It incorporates cells and genes and all sorts of interesting things. It was really a field right on the cusp of being understood, and I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to work with some of the greats in the field. Worked in many leading research institutions, worked with a lot of Nobel Prize winners, published papers with them, and just had a huge amount of fun discovering stuff that was of great use to, the whole world. We've just been through a pandemic that kind of demonstrated that to all of us.
And what principles of immunology do you segue into the VC world?
Well, I'm not sure I segue immunology per se. I would put it more broadly as a scientist. I'm aware and base my work on evolution. And that is directly relevant to venture capital and entrepreneurs and investing. We all have ideas as to what might be improvements. Nature throws out ideas or variations randomly, but then it's the world that responds and picks out those that work, whether it's a new form of a gene or a new company. And so really, as an investor, I am farming evolution, and the creatures that I'm farming are entrepreneurs and companies and technologies. I don't know ahead of time what's going to really work and be useful. I give it my best guess. I go into it with humility and diligence, and a fair amount of what I do then turns out to be good stuff.
So I'm a huge believer in the laws of evolutions applied to the startup world. Is there a place for empathy in there and helping people that are not fit for survival? Is there a place in that market for that?
Oh, that's a deep question. Sure. I mean, we're all human beings. We want to have empathy, and we want to have respect for the people we deal with, and, serve with respect. I believe in, servant leadership, not arrogant, royal leadership. And we've all had luck. You and I probably are here having this conversation. We've worked hard, but we've also been very lucky. There are people just as capable as us who haven't had the advantages, and there but for the grace of God go I. It's an old expression. Recognize that we're not superior just based on who we are. It's us sitting on the other side of the table or on the other side of the street. So we have to be aware of that.
Right. I feel that this podcast, for example, it's free. It's good value for people to, pick some ideas and possibly apply them in that market. That was one of the reasons why I actually started it. I think it is right to be, the king of the jungle, but you need to share. And once you're at the top, right? In our world, it's information. And one thing that I've observed lately is that a lot of wealthy people, they thrive off secrecy, and they thrive off not sharing how they made it up there. Do you feel the same way about that? And how could we change that?
There are people who use secrecy and are, addicted to it. I don't think there's anything that I do that I'm not willing to share and talk about. My secret sauce, if you will, is not a patent or something written down that I can hide. It's what goes on up here and the experiences I've had. So I am fortunately willing. I'm not averse to someone making profit from something that they've worked hard to invent and develop. But I'm going to sort of give you a little story or a result that I discovered in my life. It's a scientific defense of generosity and empathy. I spent a sabbatical once doing computer simulations on evolution. And so we set up a toy system. We populated it and then studied its evolution to greater, utility and function. There are two ways to approach it. One is to clamp down really hard on king of the jungle. Whoever gets ahead fastest, furthest wins, and everybody else falls by the wayside. And then there's a more generous, empathetic, in your word, approach, where you might lead the parade, but you let a lot more people stay in the parade. And which of those two approaches ends up working best in the end? Perhaps surprisingly, the one that develops more slowly at first by empathy and sharing, actually in the end, the whole system works the best. It works better than the very competitive, arrogant, throw everybody else out by the wayside. So that's kind of a scientific discovery of principles of human empathy.
Right. And I think as men or as leaders, you need to align yourself with testosterone, I found, to have fun and to be happy, which is like to thrive. And yes, there is some destruction, but there's also some creation. And my analogy to it is like you're an ice breaking boat, you break the ice, and then there's other smaller and medium-sized boat that can follow and benefit of you having all that energy and putting yourself first and having yourself there to sacrifice yourself, all that energy that you accumulated. It's just that when you break the ice and the ice kind of solidifies itself and you're the only one going in that path, that seems a bit toxic. So thanks for sharing your philosophy on that. You've flown a whole lot. You've been a flight instructor. I'm a proponent of having views, like physical views in life, to inspire yourself and to have like an eagle's eye view of the market and seeing where the ball is going. Do you feel that when you fly, you get more of these ideas as a VC and you get clearer thinking?
I wouldn't. I say my flying experiences have made me a more disciplined and focused person. You learn to focus on what's important, to ignore the irrelevant or the distractions. It's a whole lot of fun as well. I mean, I've had experiences in powered and unpowered planes where, I'm one of the birds. I've been aloft for hours without burning any gasoline after the initial, tow upwards. Or crossing the country. I used to commute 1,000 miles in my own airplane to go to work. And, it's focused. You're not thinking about a whole lot of other things while you're doing it, but, the ability to focus and master a craft and teach others, that's very satisfying. And that experience can be extended to, almost any other activity.
1,000 miles to work. That's pretty interesting. So back and forth, right? Um,
Not every
that's
day.
that's pretty cool though. The money that you had from being a VC at first, how did you accumulated these resources at first, and uh, when did you decided to actually take these risks with your own money?
Okay, well, we talked before about our fortune and luck in life. I came from a background where I was not wealthy. My parents worked hard, but I was never hungry and I was sheltered. So, you know, I haven't been desperately poor, and I can only be empathetic to people who have been through no fault of their own. So I had comfort. I've been fortunate in that I've always been able to work at things that I enjoy doing, I love doing, and be paid to do it. So that's been another great fortune. I've been thrifty. I've put aside 5 or 10 cents of every dollar I made since I was a kid. And that became the start of my VC work, is my own savings. Now, I used to invest in public markets before I learned about startup ecosystem. But when I learned about it, seemed a way to crystallize and utilize everything I knew scientifically, professionally, financially, et cetera. Plus, I keep meeting really interesting people, the entrepreneurs. And the last thing, an important thing I want to put out here is, as an investor, I have an enormous luxury that the entrepreneurs I work with don't. So the entrepreneur puts 110% of their effort and focus into their venture. And, sometimes it succeeds, more often it fails. And hopefully they have a backup and a support system that then they can try again on a different project. But it's win or lose for them. As investors, we know how uncertain it is, how hard it is to predict the outcome. And so any successful investor will have a portfolio of investments in enterprises that they think might make it. Hopefully they will. We try to help them along. But we inevitably have failures. But if we have enough candidates in the race, horses in the race, we also have almost a guarantee of some success and sustainability. So this notion of having a portfolio makes investing way less risky than entrepreneurship. And I can only have respect and admiration for those that wear that hat.
And what kind of brain do you need to be a very successful VC?
Oh, I think anybody can do it if you learn what you need to do and approach it with diligence and humility. Just like when I taught people to fly airplanes, if they could walk in the door without hurting themselves, drive in a car to the flight school and walk in the door, I could teach them to fly. I believe the same thing about investing. You do have to have a certain tolerance for risk and understanding in either of those activities. You go up, it's a really big deal when you've taken a student along to the first solo flight and you get out of the airplane and you say, okay, now you do it yourself. And they look at you and their eyes get big and they know now that you're not there to save their rear end. They're going to do it themselves. That's a measure of responsibility. It's not risky because we've practiced everything that can happen, but it's still a big step. And being an investor, some people are just not built for the uncertainty and the knowledge that some of their deals are going to fail. It will happen. And if you can't, handle that and rejoice in your successes rather than bemoan your failures, then maybe it's not the right activity for you. In which case, those people should put their money into a venture capitalist care like my own.
There you go. And I guess ultra patience and trust in the other and some ease to depart with your capital.
Well, trust is important in any interaction. One of the things that aligns trust is when your capital and my capital are riding on the line together. I'm not going to be careless with yours if mine is at the same place. Patience is certainly an important attribute. but in life, you don't expect to have everything you want tomorrow. You work at it and you develop your family or your business or anything else, your farm. But it's certainly a worthwhile place to allocate and use some of your resources if you have them.
Tell me a bit more about reciprocal rights and the obligations of citizenship.
Okay. I can see you've been doing some reading, some research. Well, I think I believe in any interaction that there are reciprocal rights and responsibilities. If I'm a venture capitalist working with other people's money, those are my limited partners. They have expectations of me, and I've made commitments to them. And we have a legal system that will penalize someone who doesn't live up to their obligations. When I put our money into a company, we've got legal documents that specify what the relationship will be and what each of us has to and is expected to do. Those are almost sacred. If you break that, then you disappoint everybody. Same thing in a relationship, parents and children, spouses, married partners, citizens in a society. I wrote something which you've obviously read about citizenship. Citizenship comes with opportunities and advantages, but it also has responsibilities. So if you don't, play your part as an informed citizen and participate in a democracy, well, you might lose it. And if you haven't played your part, then you've got only yourself to blame. So that's a reciprocal right and responsibility situation.
So why do people break these gentlemen agreements all the time? I call them gentlemen agreements because it's probably there in the law, but it's mostly like a verbal or a non-written agreements. Is it desperation? Is it the fact that we don't tell them like, hey, you were born in a society and either you add value to it or you live by yourself? Why do folks keep on breaking and trying to cheat that?
Well, two parts. First of all, in the financial world, they are, in fact, and should always be written agreements that you can't say later, oh, we didn't agree to that. And we can say, oh, yes, we did. Here's the paper. That's your signature on it. We did agree to it. There's no uncertainty. That's a very important thing. And, most people are honorable and try to behave properly. There are some that we're going to get to in a second who don't. And the law is there and it has to be employed occasionally, unfortunately. Shouldn't be that way, but sometimes it is because people they're not thinking ahead. They just see what's in front of them at the moment. They see an immediate advantage for themselves in behaving a certain way. And they're not thinking about the big picture. When they break their word or their written agreement with somebody, no one else can afford or should deal with them in the future. They're just showing themselves to be thoughtless and, non-truthful people. So I think any short-term advantage they get is usually illusory. I've taught a lot about this subject, and the only exception that sort of proves the rule, if you can steal enough the first time and then run away with your enormous stolen returns and never have to deal with anybody again, you live on your own island. I suppose it might make sense to be a thief, but most people can't steal that much at once and get, the first time and get away with it and never have to deal with the world again. So most of us are
I don't think that ever happened in this. Well, like maybe like 1 to 2% of the time, but like people
even
always
less
catch
than
you,
that.
Yeah. And I believe in the future in which AGI will just record everything of the past. It will be able to come back in time and know everyone's sins, So would it be fair to call that AGI some type of God?
Well, I don't think so. Actually, if you give me a soapbox, I'll stand up and discuss and debate AI or AGI at some length. To me, AI is just the use of computers to do things faster and more effectively than we could without them. a steam shovel or an air hammer is a tool that extends what we can do physically and simply ourselves. Computers are the same way. They can sort through numbers and they can add them and compare them and detect patterns. But what's done with them, that's still a human exercise. And I don't believe computers will ever do that. And if we allow them to, then we've really screwed ourselves. That should not come to pass. So can computers remember everything? I'm not even there with you, because what you put into your computer, Charlie said this, I can put into my computer that Charlie said something else. And so now our computers are in disagreement, and which one is right? Fake news. That's a huge problem. The background I come from, science, it is built on reproducibility and the ability of anybody to replicate a result. You do the same thing, you should get the same result. And that's what makes good science. If you can't do that, if you can't replicate it, it's now just a story, a narrative. It's not science anymore. And that's what I think is missing from a lot of the discussion about AGI and computers and knowing everything. It's only as good as what went into it.
Yeah, long discussion though. I want to ask something. Let's say that there is such an AGI and they found out that your great-great-grandfather stole $2 million and no one ever held him accountable for that. I was reading yesterday about some crimes that were committed in Second World War, comfort women's by Japan,
Sure.
and Korea wanted Japan still after 30, 40, 50 years, because they paid various time that they have to pay again for the war crimes that they committed. Is it fair to ask for someone to pay for an error they did some time ago? And what about jailing folks? Couldn't we rehabilitate people that broke these written agreements in a better way?
Well, several things in that question. I'm not so convinced that I am accountable for the deeds of my great-grandfather, whom I know nothing about, or I never met my great-grandfather. If that line of argument, we should be trying very hard to give up and recede and give back all the caves to the Neanderthals, which we, form of humans, wiped out. I don't believe that's possible in human history. In terms of rehabilitating individuals, to some extent it's possible, but to some extent it's probably not, because what we do is based partly on our nature, our genes, and partly on our nurture, the experience and teachings and learnings that we've had in our life. And some of those, I think, are in fact impossible to change or rewire. I'm not so sure about the death penalty, but keeping people away and imprisoned from doing further harm to other innocent people, I'm not sure I don't see an alternative to that. You could try some re-education, but if it doesn't take, then the innocents deserve protection. That's a numbers and a probability game, but I think they have rights too.
I think that's where computers and AI can possibly help us with being a bit more creative, and because we might have a shield, an emotional shield that are like, yeah, this guy is either an idiot or a murderer or someone that just doesn't change. And the AI could allow us to have many paths for that person and test rapidly what works and what doesn't, and if we see X amount of progress that day, then put them in the right path, and give them the attention, because I think it's the same problem as teachers. It's just that no one ever gave these folks attention since they were young. And if they have someone to accompany them throughout their growth cycle in life and rehabilitate, if we let vengeance aside, right, which seems to me like a very primal feeling, maybe we could have a better planet. And the same for folks that just ruin this environment, they just don't know better. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm not a big believer in vengeance, but I would put it as practicality of allowing someone who's done something wrong the opportunity to do it again. I think everyone else deserves protection from that. And you seem to see possibilities in computerization, AGI, you're calling it. To me, it's really the issue of individualized attention and whether an individual is really only the pattern or the group that they come from, or really an individual. And, you know, people were educated individually and trained very effectively long before computers were around. So I think that's the essence of the, you know, possibility. I'll tell you a funny story. I have homes in several US states. And a couple of years ago, my property insurance on one of them, where I have my cars registered, skyrocketed. It went up 300%. And my property insurance on the other home, which I don't have cars registered at, stayed the same. And so I called the insurance company, and they were into the new AI and computerized pattern recognition. And they said, oh, well, we found that people with old cars tend to burn their houses down more often. Well, I have old cars. I get every mile out of my car. And so I'm one of these unfortunate people in the pattern who has old cars. I do not believe I'm more likely to burn my house down because I'm very careful. But that's data analysis and pattern recognition, and I got caught in it.
Right. Challenging, but that seems to me like it is like old data stuff, not really like personalized AI, because personalized AI would also look into your psychographics, your output, you know, your inputs, pretty much everything, and give you a better prediction of the future than you would actually predict yourself, you know. It would actually predict that you would go at this place at this time, and you'd be like, oh, you're right. I'm exactly going there. I'm going to fly 1,000 miles today. But yeah, I think, yeah, nowadays it seems that, well, to a lot of AI folks that I spoke with, it seems that it's the way OpenAI is doing AI with LLMs and ChatGPT, it seems that it's not super scalable. So I guess we'll leave that for another debate because we're already out of time here, or another conversation. Can you tell us, Charles, where we can find out more information about you?
Well, one can always Google search me, and you'll find me as a flight instructor or a scientist or a venture capitalist or other things I've done. I have my venture capital firm has a naively simplistic website that has good information. Doesn't look beautiful, but you can look there. It's ecs-partners.com, which has links and videos of me. You can, it also, if you go on to LinkedIn, you can find my email address and my phone number and all, so you can always contact me. I'm not shy.